Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to our Check Essay, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's a human resilience and conscious relationship coach, no other than Mr. Michael Ostrolenk. Welcome, Mr. Michael on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself? That I
I,
must.
I certainly can. And first of all, thank you very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation. For almost 30 years now, I've been practicing as a psychotherapist. I got licensed almost 30 years ago. I switched to being a coach around 2000, so about 25 years of coaching. But I originally started out as a marriage and family therapist. So I've been in this space for about 30 years. 10 of those years, I was a master coach at SailFit's Unbeatable Mind Academy, and 4 of those years I spent at Spartan 7, a sail run company by a gentleman named Dan Cirillo, who unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. So I spent a lot of time in different milieus in kind of the human optimization, human resilience, human health space. One of the hats I wore is I spent about 4 years working for Dan and Dan Stickler, Dr. Dan Stickler, Micro Hamilton, at a Paron Zoe, a precision-based medical clinic in Austin, Texas. I was the director of human resilience there. So some of my time has been spent more in the health optimization space. Some of my time is more spent in the human resilience space. But I'm also 30 years in and working with couples as well as a marriage and family therapist, but more recently as a coach.
Mr. Michael,
Yes, sir.
thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And today, let's talk about creating more meaningful relationships by fostering a deeper connection. So, tell us, before we connect deeply with others, we must first understand ourselves. What does the process of self awareness look like, and why is it crucial first step?
That's a great question. And actually, I would add to that, yes, it's really important for self-awareness, but a lot of self-awareness actually comes in relationships. It's one thing if I sat in a cave and meditated, for years and years and years, I would definitely learn a lot about myself. But I actually learned probably a lot more, or at least differently, in relationship with another human being or multiple human beings. But on the self-awareness side, I stack 4 different things, which I think are really important. One is understanding one's wounds, things that drive us to act in certain ways in our life. We call defense mechanisms. That we created probably either in utero or earlier in life, and we operate in that when we have real perceived threats in the world. So self awareness, in one instance, is about being aware of one's wounds. A second thing is being aware of one's nervous system, how one responds, or if they're able to manage themselves, react, and if they're able to manage themselves, respond to life's conditions, whether it's internal things that are going on or in relation to another human being or situation. So being aware of like how your nervous system does what it does do on a daily basis is really important. For me, the third thing is like what level of conscious development are you at? There are like 21 lines of development. So where are you in your complexity of your thinking? Where are you with your emotional intelligence? Where are you with your moral development? Understanding where you are in terms of various lines and stages of development can be really helpful because then you can get a sense of what might be next for you in terms of your own development. And for me, the last piece, and this is what I usually start all my clients around, is understanding your human physical system, not just the psychological system, but the physical system, and optimizing it. Being aware of how circadian biology, the day night cycles, affects one's mood, cognition, energy levels, how diet and nutrition affects those same things, how sleep affects those things, how movement or lack thereof affects those things, how we handle stress, and how that shows up in our physical system. So I would say self awareness is all those 4 things stacked together at least.
Mr. Michael, tell us, how can we become more aware of our own emotional patterns and defenses that might be unintentionally keeping people at distance?
That's a great question. And my postgraduate work is in somatic or body psychology. So to answer the question, I would say it's really important for individuals to start being aware of their own somatic or bodily processes. So if a client comes to me and they're talking about being, let's just say they're being angry, they're angry about X, Y, or Z. I wouldn't exactly say it this way, but it's almost like, okay, anger is a nice concept. It's a cognitive concept. How do you actually experience anger? How do you know that you're angry? And at the very beginning, a lot of people are like, I don't know, I'm just angry. But they sit and they deepen their awareness of like how they actually do anger. And I'll make this up because everyone's unique, but they might notice their heart rate gets faster. They might notice that they hold their breath. They might notice there's tightness in their jaws or their shoulders. Everyone manifests physically their emotions differently. There are some general patterns in human beings, but everyone's similarly unique. So the first thing I have people do is go from abstract to concrete. How do they actually experience that emotion, not as a concept, but as a somatic experience? That to me is the first step in generating awareness.
Many of us wear a social mask. What does it take to feel safe enough to take the mask off, both ourselves and allow others to do the same?
That's a great question. It's really interesting because it literally came up in a couple's work that I've been doing this last week. So I would say it's two different things. If you are in a relationship, one of the first steps that can be really helpful is having your partner learn how to create the environment that's more safe for you. And that means you have to be aware of like what you might need from your partner in any particular situation, which requires some deep awareness and then some healthy expression. And your partner has to be open enough to hear what's being asked of them and then develop the internal awareness and capacities to provide it to you as best as he or she can. That to me is one of the first steps because if your partner can create the space in which you can feel more comfortable sharing and being more authentic, then you can start practicing doing so. However, ultimately, it doesn't really matter about the person out here. I mean, it's always helpful, especially if you're in a romantic partnership, to have a safe person in your life. But the safety actually has to come from within, is my experience at least. So, yes, let's have someone out here who can help create a safer environment, who can actually listen and can support us the way we need to be supported so we can feel safe enough to share. But like I said, ultimately, I have to feel, or the individual has to feel safe within themselves. So it doesn't really matter, although it's helpful, what's happening outside of themselves. They can drop the masks, they feel whole and grounded in themselves and be self expressive. So I'd say both, but ultimately the individual.
Vulnerability is often cited the key to connection, but it's also scary. How do we navigate the risk of being vulnerable without feeling overexposed to insecure, Mr. Michael?
Yeah, another really good question. So I'm just going to put this in terms of a couple because it's different, perhaps in the workplace, depending if you're the boss or an employee or a manager. All those relationships are different. Or if you're a child to you're a parent or a parent to a child. Let's just do a couple. And I would say when I start working with couples, very low hanging fruit is really important. So you don't necessarily go for the huge, crucial conversations because the inner resources have not necessarily been cultivated that allow the one person to hear it and not get defended, or even if they get defended, they're able to manage themselves. And for the other person to not operate necessarily out of fear, but courage and learn to be aware of and express themselves. So I start with the very low hanging fruit. So you get the practice of what it's like to do that, and then I work with both people. One of the things I work with couples, for instance, is agreements. What are the agreements on how we handle any particular issue around finances, children, sex, religion, work-related issues? A lot of people walk into relationships with kind of pre-programmed ways of engaging with other people, in this case, their romantic partner, and it's not openly discussed and agreed upon how we're going to handle these things. You bring in your family of origin programming, your culture, your religion, your nationality, geographic region. There's a lot of cultural forces that influence how we do these things. And one of the things I have clients do, couples, is like, okay, let's come up with an agreement. How do we want to actually handle whatever the situation is? And then they talk through it. They come up with the parameters and the guidelines, and this is what we agree to. That's only the first step because it goes to your point. If we have an agreement and yet I'm triggered or activated or upset and I don't live into that agreement because I get defended or however I do the defensive, maybe I get aggressive or maybe I withdraw. Over time, my partner's not going to trust me in my word. Oh, I want to live into this agreement, but I'm not living into the agreement. Now, we're humans. We're not always going to do things perfectly, but that's where the first thing I share with you comes in. I encourage my clients to do the healing work to heal their wounds, to manage their nervous system, to evolve their consciousness, and also to optimize their physicality. And a lot of people are like, why would they need to optimize their physicality? Because I literally work with diet, nutrition, fitness and movements, sleep with my clients. Why? Because if you feel like crap, you're low energy, your cognition is down, you have brain fog, you're irritable, all those things happen when you're not eating well, sleeping well, living within 24-hour day-night cycles. It's really hard to show up in a loving, caring, compassionate way. So optimize your human system, learn to regulate your nervous system, learn to heal your wounds. Those are the things that we start doing together to support the agreements so you can live by your word.
Interesting indeed, Mr. Michael. And we often listen to reply, not to understand. What does a deep listening truly look like in practice, and how can we cultivate it in our fast paced world?
Yeah, so that's another really good question. And it's one that sounds easy. Ultimately, it is, but it's really challenging because we are actually not taught to listen. We're taught to think through our response. And in many cases, especially in the primary romantic relationship, defend ourselves, prove ourselves right. Like I'm right. He or she is wrong, and I need to prove to you that you're right or wrong. Or that you're wrong, I'm right. And in doing so, I don't really listen. So when I talk about deep listening, it's multiple different things. You actually want to listen to the words being said, the tone, the volume. So you're listening to the language being used. That's very important. But you're also paying attention to the body. The body shares its wisdom and can tell you really a lot of what's going on inside that person. So you just pay attention. You pay attention to their facial expressions. You can pay attention to their muscle tension. You can pay attention to their posture. You can pay attention to the coloring of their skin, their temperature of their skin as well. So that provides a lot of information. And I'll say a couple other things like your heart. Be open and listen literally with your heart. Listen with your gut. We know that there's a brain in the gut, so it actually can listen and understand things. You get a gut feeling, as an example. There's something called the transrational intuition. That's like the download that you can get. It might have spiritual connotations for some, it might not, whatever that is for you. But you listen with your ears, you listen with your eyes, you listen with your heart, you listen with your stomach or your gut, and you listen with your transrational intuition. And you get a larger picture of what's going on. And I also will tell, especially with my couples, don't just listen to the words and the tone and volume, although that's really important. Listen to what's actually being asked of you from the other person. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to dive into that a little bit more.
Yes, go ahead, mister.
Okay. So like let's just say you have a couple and they're arguing about whatever they're arguing about. And I'll just say the wife and husband, I'll make it a heterosexual couple and they're having an argument. And let's just say the this actually came up literally a couple of days ago, so I'll just use this example. The wife actually acknowledged that she was picking on him. She was poking him for various reasons, not to get into them on this podcast, but she was poking him. So and he was responding to what she was saying, which led to this conflict that was never ending. There's no way to get out of this conflict. She's right, he's right, she's wrong, he's wrong, blah blah blah. And I said to her during our couple session, I said, let's just slow down for a minute and go inside. What do you imagine you actually were trying to accomplish by poking him. The surface level is a conflict. And what came of this, and parents will recognize this, or if you're a kid, you probably know kids when you're a kid who seek negative attention. Like they act out and they seek negative attention. And what the research shows is those kids are just seeking attention. The best thing they can understand to do is seek negative attention when they're actually seeking attention. So what she was able to discover through her own exploration in that moment while we're looking, having her go in and look, was like, she really didn't want to pick a fight. She just wanted to be heard. She wanted to be loved and held, not necessarily physically held, but she wanted to be seen by him. And is an unskillful way of doing so. Poking him is not going to get him to want to hold her, listen to her, understand her better. But that's the best she could do in the moment because of her own defense system that pops up. He, because of his own defense systems, wasn't paying attention to what she's actually needing, just heard the words and was ready for battle. So they battle. But once she acknowledged that, like, oh, actually, I just want contact with him, and I wasn't doing it in the healthiest way, I said to him afterwards, I say, in the future, and this goes for both. It's just not a wife to a husband, or it's a husband to a wife, or whatever the coupledom is. It's like, listen to the words, listen to the tone, the volume, but look for what's actually being asked for underneath. And in many cases, at least in my experience of doing this for 30 years, is for connection. And even if they're unskilled and they're doing it wrong, and they're leading to a fight, if the other person can manage their nervous systems and not get defended, open their heart and say, oh my God, the love of my life, this person in front of me that I've committed my life to, yeah, they're not really skilled at this very moment because they're upset with what they're saying, but I understand they really just want contact. They want to be held. They want to be understood. They want to be heard. I'm going to do that instead of fighting. That can go a long way for both members of the couple to do it that way. That's listening, deep, deep listening.
Deep listening for sure. And how can we better express our needs and boundaries in a way that actually strengthens a relationship instead of creating distance?
Another good question. So the needs thing is really interesting. And I've found that most people don't even know what their needs, wants, or desires are. They might have a surface level grasp on it. There might be a few things that they're really clear about, but I actually will have in a couple, both people sit down separately and like write up it, after a meditation what their needs, wants, and desires are, and get really clear. And I'm a broken record because I always say from abstract to concrete. Like if you say if your need is to be loved, I'm like that sounds really nice, but that's very abstract. What do you actually mean? What very concrete behaviors from your partner would indicate to you that they're being loving, or they're being present, or they're being empathetic? So these words are nice, but what very particular behavior? So I have them go from abstract, like, hey, here's at least 10 needs that I have or wants or desires in a relationship, to very concrete behaviors, which indicate the other person groks the need and is able to do a behavior to meet the needs. And I always tell people, hey, 80-20, you're not going to get all your needs met all the time in your partnership. People have rough days. They're not always in the mood, but you'd hope 80-20, 80-20. But like, so first of all, like, hey, get really clear what your needs are, or at least a handful of them at least. Go from abstract to very concrete. And then you need to learn how to ask for them to be met. That is really huge. Not only do most people don't know what their needs are, most people don't know how to ask for their needs to be met. What I'll see is like, you're not doing this. If someone's doing this to you and this is my need and they're complaining to you that their need's not being met, a human reaction would be like, well, no wonder I don't want to give you your need because you're just like attacking me. And I understand this thing because after a while you get really frustrated. You're like, I just want something from you different than I'm getting from you, and I understand the frustration, but that's not helpful. That literally will not get your needs met. You'll do the opposite. You'll get less of your needs met. So like, okay, I'm really clear on what concretely what some of my needs are. I need to be able to skillfully ask them to the other person. And I need to be mindful of how the other person, not only how I say it, what I say, the tone and the volume, but how it's received by the other person. Because, some people are hypersensitive to being criticized. So even if I do the best job ever of, asking for my need to be met with a nice tone, quiet voice and loving tone and stuff like that, if I know my partner's really sensitive, maybe they've suffered trauma in the past or whatever, I need to be mindful of that because I could do the best job ever, yet they're going to perceive it not well based on my intent. So, there needs to be working through your perceptions of how you perceive your partner, but your partner also has to be working on how they express it in a healthy, useful way, not only for them to express it, which is important, but also to be heard. That's where the active listening or the deep listening comes in. Can the other person hear what you were saying? Can they listen to it deeply and respond to it, not react to it? Like this is a reaction. This is like, oh, I want to serve you. I love you. I care for you. I want to provide for you as best as I can my needs. I'm open. I'm not defended. Those are the things that are really, really important in terms of
Truly
needs.
important. Truly important, Mr. Michael. And what are the common signs that a relationship is remaining on a superficial level? And what can we do to gently steer into a deeper waters?
Another really good question. I appreciate you, man. You got some good questions.
Thank you.
Every couple is unique, but I'll throw out some basic things that I've seen over 30 years of doing this. But like I said, everyone's unique in their relationship. So, bed death. There's
Mm.
no sexual engagement, or it's getting less and less and less and less. And I don't mean because there's health conditions or medical conditions, health conditions, but like there's less erotic attraction to your partner. It just diminishes over time, and you're more like roommates. That's one. Another thing, I see this a lot if you have kids and all your attention, whether depending on the age of the kids, is like aimed at the kids. So like, you first start dating, you're like all lovey-dovey into each other. You get married, you eventually have
Yes.
kids, and you go from facing each other to facing the children. And it makes sense. You do have to pay attention to your children. You have to raise them. But like you stop paying attention to your partner. You have like you've turned them into a rock. You believe you know who they are, exactly how they'll respond to everything. There's no space for evolution and growth and development, and it's like you don't date your partner anymore. So one other thing that I see besides crib death, not crib death, bed death, is like there's no dating. There's no romantic interludes. There's no like going out for dinners or movies or cuddling up on the couch and watching your favorite TV show or movies. Whatever the thing is that you guys would do when you dated and it was exciting and fun. Maybe when dancing, I don't know. Everyone's different. All that stuff is now gone. You're just doing the conventional life. So that's another thing that I see a lot that occurs. Let me just stop there and see if you have any questions on those too before I continue.
Yes. So, how can we healthily handle the fear of rejection that often holds us back from reaching out for a deeper connection?
Uh, So are you asking that in a already existing romantic relationship, or are you talking about someone who's single and wants to date and find a partner?
Yes. Well, in both.
Okay,
If
okay. The fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, those are so huge. And it goes back to your original question about self-awareness. A lot of people aren't even aware that they're driven like patterns of behavior, programs in their unconscious mind that are driven by fear of being abandoned and rejected. So just knowing that, if you know that to be true, and your attachment style is so, so important. Because if you know that you're driven somewhat by some unconscious behaviors around fear of being rejected or abandoned inside of a relationship, then you can start doing the inner work necessary to stabilize your system so you're less likely to operate from that, or at least reduce the chances of that operating through you. While you are doing the work to get more secure inside yourself, so you're not operating from the fear of rejection or abandonment, I would work like if I was working with you as a couple, I would work with the other person who maybe who wants to, of course, because they love you and support you, wants to support you through this process you're going through in terms of your own rejection concerns and abandonment, and I'd have them find out from you what you need in any particular moment so you feel more secure in a relationship. Ultimately, it has to come from within. Ultimately, it has to come from within. You got to do the work. So you become secure in yourself. It's not necessarily even about the other person. You're insecure in yourself. But until you get there, there's stages of this, and it can be really helpful if your partner can show up in new and unique ways to support you. So maybe there are things you want them to say or do that makes you just feel more comfortable and less insecure. There's things you'd like them not to say or do in the short run that would make you feel more secure and comfortable inside the relationship. But it requires you to do the work so you become secure in yourself. So ultimately, you don't need the other person to do anything to make you feel secure. But and I can't give you like this is exactly what the other person should do for you because I don't feel like everyone's unique. Some people might more want more physical touch, more words of affirmation, all the different things, the different love languages. Maybe they need a little bit more of those on certain days or not. It's unique to every individual. So if a couple came to me, I couldn't say here's a universal. It's really unique to you. How can we help this person become more secure? Cool. And while we're doing that, doing the inner work for the healing and the self-regulation, how can we educate this person to support this person in new and unique ways so they feel more secure in the short run while they're working on themselves?
Mr. Michael, is there a difference between a deep connection and a close or dependent one? How do we ensure our quest for depth remains healthy?
Yeah, it's really funny. I was going to use this word a moment ago in answering one of your questions, but codependence is kind of a popular word, pop psychology. And ultimately, my hope for every human being, but especially with my clients, I work with individuals or couples or the men's group that I co-facilitate, is helping people become more and more sovereign. So they are free from the programming from society, from their family of origin. And when I say free from it, like, they can choose to follow certain mores and conventions and religious practices and beliefs. I'm not suggesting you follow nothing, but I'm saying you're choosing to follow the things because you're a choice, not because they're programming from your family or your community or your ethnicity or your religion, whatever it happens to be, all those cultural forces. So the more free you can be from them and you just operate from your own heart, your own soul, depending on religious inclinations, your spiritual inclinations, you can use different words. While you're trying to do that, and this is what I said at the very beginning, you can sit in a cave and you can learn a lot about yourself. And I'm a big fan of meditation. I've been meditating since I was 9. And yet it's in the relationships where you really get to see who you are and how you show up. So with that said, you can use the relationships to begin to see where you are codependent, where perhaps you are a people pleaser, where perhaps you are, pushing people away because you're afraid of connection. People do different things. Some people chase people, some people hide from people. There's different attachment styles. So like you get to know those patterns in yourself and you do the work to free yourself from those patterns so you're no longer codependent on the other person or running away from the other person because you're afraid of intimacy. You're at choice every moment of every day, and you can choose to engage this person from a healthier place. So I'd say that's ultimately sovereignty from the heart is really, really important.
Very well said, Mr. Michael. Very well said. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season. I'm a book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Michael, if you could leave our audience or viewers with one simple but profound practice to start building more meaningful relationships tomorrow, what would it be?
I would say kindness, and this doesn't even have to be with people although that can be really nice. It's like, but strangers in the world. We live in a very VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain calendar. There's a lot of changes politically, geopolitically, culturally, technologically. And a lot of people are afraid of the changes which they see in the world, good or bad. They're just afraid and they're operating from insecurities. So I'd say one thing I would just encourage everyone to do is be as kind as possible. If you see a friend, a family member in need, if you can, help them. If you see a stranger in need, if you can, help them. You never know, the smallest act of kindness can literally save a life. You'll hear stories of someone who's literally on their way to commit suicide. They've just given up on life for whatever reason, and someone interdicts them on the way to do whatever they're going to do, jump off the bridge or shoot themselves or train or whatever the thing is, and someone acts kindly to them, and it has them pause and gives them a glimmer of hope. That's what I want to pass on. Be kind and give people glimmers of hope that everything we just talked about is possible for all of us.
Be kind indeed, Mr. Michael Ostrolenk. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, you can learn about my work at my website, Michael, Michael, the letter D, Ostrolenk, Ostrolenk.com. It has all my work with individuals, couples, my men's group, and other kind of fun things I'm involved in.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Michael Ostrolenk because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Mr. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Monticon people, see you soon.